I work for the National Park Service as a full-time ranger here in Cape Hatteras National Seashore. I'm not going to state my name because I don't want to be labeled potentially as a whistleblower. That could get me into a lot of deep legal water. I'm sure you already know. I'm simply letting you know about my own personal experiences that I've had in reference to the topic of the unexplained and encounters on the Outer Banks of Northern Carolina. In the vicinity of North Carolina's Cape Hatteras National Seashore, there have been several instances of unidentifiable flying objects and tracking of extremely large creatures here on the Outer Banks. The sightings have occurred primarily off the Oregon Inlet, near the town of Buxton, North Carolina. In the summer of 2006, there was actually a sighting off the Frisco Pier of an oval-shaped craft with no lights, no exhaust, and quite frankly, no sound. It was seen and spotted by multiple people, which always adds validity when you have multiple eyewitnesses claiming to see the same thing, all unrelated to each other and having no correlation or interrelations. In fact, one lady actually on the pier managed to take a picture of it as it rose up and back out over the ocean. I was informed the photo camera was set to ISO 800 with a 1/60th of a second shutter speed. But the photos come out as a black square, which should not even be possible. I have requested the photo from the witness, but I have yet to see it. In the summer of 2016, I was an intern at the Touch Tank in the Museum of Life and Science in Durham, North Carolina. After work, I was walking along the beach and encountered two NPS employees. One of the men was the Chief of Cultural Resources for the Outer Banks. I was informed from that distance they too had seen a large object moving along the beach at a certain height and then stepping off the coastline into the ocean. At first, the object appeared to be a large cliff face with two glowing dots on top. As it moved further out over the water, it was noted that the top of the cliff face was a large bird with glowing eyes. The height of the animal was well over 10 feet when it flew off the coastline, diving into the ocean like a bird. The witnesses then attempted to draw a line on the map that would connect their location to the location of where they saw the animal jump off the coastline. I've not heard back of them regarding a map. There have also been numerous other reports of large black birds with glowing red eyes. And finally, in July of 2017, I was on patrol near the beach and found a strange object on the beach. I brought it back to the visitor center, where the deputy supervisor of the Outer Banks Visitor Center told me that there had been one keeping it in the basement for years. It was a strange metallic-like orb that I'd never seen before. It was like it was a perfect sphere. I heard that it was now confiscated and could no longer be had. I know for a fact that other rangers here in Cape Hatteras National Seashore have seen things that cannot be explained. One of them actually saw a large creature with glowing red eyes that he's too scared to really talk about. I've also heard from other NPS employees here in the National Capital Region having very similar experiences with Wolfman and Bigfoot apparently. I hope you are able to use the information I have provided, and I hope that I'm not threatened or retaliated against. I hope you understand that I'm purposely being vague about everything I'm sharing with you, for fear of retribution against me, my well-being, my family, and ultimately my career. I understand that you are also very interested in sightings and experiences that occur in not only the Pacific Northwest, but all across the country and the world. I'm just trying to give you a different perspective that might help you and your team. I am a ranger employed by the National Park Service. I am writing this to you because I'm still freaked out by an encounter I had with a very strange being while on the job. This dates back to June of 2015 in the Chimney Rock National Historic Site in Chimney Rock, Colorado. At the time, me and another female ranger were patrolling the hills, checking to make sure people weren't destroying the natural areas, and acting in general like rangers are supposed to act. It was roughly 10 p.m., and we were walking to the trailhead when we saw something that I can only describe as a stickman. It was about 8 feet tall and made entirely out of sticks. It seemed to be wearing some kind of white robe and was standing in front of one of many caves in the area. There are many in the Sandrock Formation. The cave was about 30 feet from us, and the entire time It stood there and did not move. We stood there for several moments, trying to understand just what we were seeing. It was motionless and unnerving. So, we decided to call the nearby fire station, who sent out a truck to check out the area. We were told that the cave we were in front of had no trails leading to it. It was filled with a deep, scree-strewn chasm that would be impossible to traverse. The only other ways in were a 40-foot cliff and a tunnel, which both led to the same place. We also mentioned our encounter, and they had agreed to keep an eye on the site. I've heard similar encounters in the area. There have also been reports of stickmen in the area too, among many reports of people going missing in the park. Just check out any of the numerous David Paulides Missing 411 series, and a strange criminal group that operates secretly in the park, known as the Black Hand. They're apparently a group of locals who protect themselves and operate throughout the park, although you cannot recognize them. They are believed to be tied to several disappearances, and they are all attributed to this group. And there's also many paranormal sightings as well. I'm curious to what you think of my encounter and all the issues that go on with the park. I hope to hear back from you soon. I work in Glacial National Park in the Montana side, and I saw a skinwalker in 2006. This was my very first year working in the park itself. The park was closed for some time due to fire danger and was very severely understaffed. I had been assigned to patrol the St. Mary area north of the park. We needed to ensure that nobody was in the backcountry, as this was a very populated area for bears. This is a very remote area. I was driving down the north side of the road and came up over a ridge and down a hill. At the bottom, I could see a car parked on the side of the road. As I got closer, I could see the figure of a person walking. He had long dark gray hair, and the figure looked bent forward as if an old man. I drove closer to inspect and see that this figure was not an old man, but actually what looked to be some sort of bear. I'm not kidding. What I thought was a human actually was some sort of bipedal animal. It was covered in long gray hair, and I pulled up about 25 feet from it, slowly as I drove my truck. Now you have to remember, as I came up and down the hill, when I first saw this figure, it was kind of covered by the trees, totally concealed, so while I could see a figure, I couldn't make out much details. But as I got closer, I could visibly see that this was not a human. He or she then crossed the road, going into the woods, and I could see that this thing had a long tail. I sat there for a few moments, trying to figure out what I saw. I was scared and felt totally alone. I got on the radio, and my coworkers who were stationed at the West Glacier District said they too had similar sightings. I told them to be careful, and I got out of there. I have no idea whose car that was originally. It was abandoned, as far as I was concerned. I've not worked that area again, but I heard there were other sightings. I'm also not Native American, but the Blackfeet tribe recognizes this as a skinwalker. I have had many sightings of bears, elk, and moose, but never seen anything quite like that. I'd been in the park for about a year when I thought I saw a wolf. I know what wolves look like, but this was not it. It was almost black. It had a bushy, kind of rat-like tail and was about 3 feet long and ran on 4 legs. It was about 60 feet away from the road. I was on my motorcycle and slowed down, but it was gone in a flash, so I only saw it for a very short amount of time. I did not report it because I figured everybody would think I was crazy. Well, about 2 months go by, and I had heard of another park employee who had a sighting of a very similar creature. I guess you can call it a rat wolf, since that's kind of what it reminded me of. Some sort of animal hybrid. It was ugly looking, but moved very quickly. Again, I'll say this. I am very aware of what a wolf looks like. I've seen them in the wild. I've been around them before. This was not it. And as far as I know, wolves don't have rat-like tails, and their faces don't look like this did. I wouldn't exactly call this a paranormal experience, but it was certainly a sighting of an unidentified creature. That's for sure. There is something out there, possibly an entire species we do not even know, that have been able to hide away in these dense woods. My experience happened here in the caves of Tom Sauk Mountain State Park in Missouri. I was in the park office talking to the rangers, and one of the fellow rangers told me about he and 2 other rangers that were stationed at the park saw a demon in the caves. Immediately, I was skeptical, thinking he was pulling my leg. But he claimed immediately he was not religious at all, and told me he had no reason to lie. And his demeanor was not very joking. It was very, very serious. He told me they were caving at night and saw this large black creature that resembled a demon with red eyes at the bottom of a pit in the cave. It was stalking them as they tried to get back to the main portion of the park outside. He said he did not know what it was and never reported it to anybody. He then informed me that the caves are actually full of Native American burial sites that are off-limits to tourists. I believe that could have been a skinwalker or a reason for seeing this ghastly apparition or an entity in physical manifestation. I believe it was something. A couple of people have also told me about a man-eating wolf that beds down in those caves too. So many strange things. Maybe there's a portal to another dimension in there. In the desert, here in the Southwest, there are no park rangers that I'm aware of who've worked in a park that have seen the Mantis Man. I've seen him at the Pueblo of Acoma and have asked other rangers and other people who work there if they had seen any large beings around who could be responsible for the legend of the Mantis Man. And none of them had seen anything like that, but there are plenty of stories about him for sure. I live about 25 miles from there, and I also had an encounter with something that was not human. I was on a scout camping trip on the Mogollon Rim. I went to the outhouse in the middle of the night to pee and to get back in time in the morning. I looked up and seen a large biped looming over me. It looked just like that thing. I finally got back to camp and told everybody in my patrol what I saw, and they all thought I was joking. I was the only one who saw it. You can use my name. It's John. So, I saw a large creature that clearly was not human. I had an encounter with a large biped who only showed himself to me and would not show himself to anybody else. This happened in the summer of 2010 while on a camping trip at the Mulligan Rim. I was going out in the middle of the night, and I got about halfway up the trail and looked up, and there was this huge bipedal creature. I was about 80 feet from him. The first thing I noticed was these glowing eyes looking at me, and then as he kind of pulled himself out into the clearing, as if he wanted me to see him, for whatever reason. Oh, and FYI, later on, my wife would reveal to me that she too, by herself that same night, saw what she described as 3 werewolf-looking creatures. She never told me out of fear that I would mock her, but later on she did reveal this to me, and I revealed my story to her that while I was out, I saw a strange creature. We relayed that entire area has a supernatural quality to it, and there's something going on there. There have been bipedal creature reports and Bigfoot sightings around here for a long time. Even many of the natives have stories, and especially all around the Petrified Forest National Park. Keep your eyes open. You never know when something is going to reveal itself to you, like it did to me that night. I've had similar experiences to those other rangers who have been harassed by wild men, as they call it. The first, I was a seasonal at the Olympic National Park in the early 1990s. I was busy eating my lunch in the Mill Creek area that was just off the highway. There's actually a small bed and breakfast here, so there were people in the area. I was eating my lunch, quietly, and all of a sudden, there was a loud ruckus noise coming from the forest. I looked at the road, and that's when I see a large, hairy biped running down the side of the mountain onto the road. I look over to the bridge and seen it jump over the bridge, down to the other side, all in one quick, fluid motion. It was distinctly walking upright, and appeared to be on two legs. It was at least 10 feet tall. I'm talking a behemoth of a being. I worried it would come back my way, so I climbed up and got out of there. It was about an hour or so when I ran down the trail. As I was running down the trail, I saw the same thing moving in the woods again. I was afraid to look directly at it, hoping it would not notice me, and kept moving. After a while, I lost it. I have no idea what it was, but in hindsight, I probably should not have ran down the trail of the woods that I just walked into. I had no idea that it was going to go in my direction. I don't believe that it was following me, though. I think it was just going in the same direction I was to almost create the effect that it was paralleling me in the woods. Either way, that was only my first encounter. The second was when I was in North Cascades in Washington, working on a backpacking trip at Glacier Peak Wilderness. We had just come down a long trail, and the ranger told us to pitch camp at the lake that we were at the time. There was one other ranger at the lake with us, so we were cooking dinner, and I had heard a loud noise coming from the lake. The lake there is very quiet, and all of a sudden, we hear this loud noise. We run back to our tents, and we could see something over by the lake. And suddenly, there's this large, black, hairy thing walking or climbing out of the lake. It was easily around 8 to 9 feet tall, huge, like the first one I saw many years before. It kind of just walked off into the timber and was gone. I woke my partner. We were all freaking out. I told him what we saw. We all did. And after that, we all left. We were not going to stick around for that. That's my story. In August of 2011, I was a 25-year-old male, MS in the U.S. Forest Service. I just began work as a backcountry ranger and was signed up for ultralight training. I had a vehicle assigned to me that I could use in the field while I was on duty, and after work, I could even use it to head home in. So on this day, it was fairly late, right around 11 p.m., maybe closer to 10:50. I had just finished my shift, clocked out, got on my car, and was driving down the city road from my ranger station and onto the paved state highway. There is a bottom section that is gravel and dips down into some swampy land before it goes back to paved. As I was driving through the swamp, it was so dark and dense, I was forced to use my high beams. And in that split second, I saw what I believed to be a full-grown Sasquatch cross in front of me quickly. It happened so fast I was in shock. I was on my way home, so I did not go back to investigate. But when I got home, I told my husband, and we told the rest of our family and friends. They laughed about it and said, "Yeah, right, so now you believe in Sasquatch." But I never really thought about it until I listened to more of your episodes, which I stumbled upon thanks to the pandemic. I kind of freaked out when I heard more of them because it completely validated my experience. While I don't have any pictures or proof of what I have, I always have the experience in my mind and my emotions. As you can probably tell, I don't talk about this to my husband or my friends anymore, not after getting mocked. Even now, my husband will still snicker and make jokes. He thinks I would just make this up. I can't believe him. Why would I do that? To think that there's people out there who just get off on mocking people like me. This is why many of us don't talk about our experiences. I don't think the real world can handle what's really out there. But after finding you, somehow randomly, on YouTube, thanks for the recommendation, YouTube, I can now feel safe about sharing my experience. I would love to try and go back if I could some point and find more prints, but I would not even know where to start. I know that I'll never forget that night for the rest of my life. It wasn't so much scary as it was shocking. I just wish I was a little braver. I am too scared, though, to pull back over and go look around for tracks or evidence. I wish I would have been more brave. Sincerely, AK. I'm a park ranger at a petrified forest national park. I don't usually report my sightings to other people. I know that they would not be believed. I have reported my sightings in the past and nothing ever came of it. In the fall of 2011, me and some other rangers were hiking up to the road to a small picnic area. One of my fellow rangers came running down the road and asked us if he had seen what he had seen. He was scared and panicking. We went down to the area where he was pointing, and we saw something large moving. We were in that area a couple of days after, and we kept seeing this thing moving off in the timber. One of the individuals on staff tried to explain it away as a bear, but there's no way a bear is going to move like that on 2 legs and move that quickly. We weren't buying it, but Mr. Biologist was certain of what it was. We also saw trees shaking violently, rocks being chucked in the air and tossed around, and a couple dead logs thrown several feet. It had to be something very large and very strong. We all know there is something there. It has been seen on several occasions. There was another time that we were hiking in a more remote area when one of the rangers had stopped in front of me and seen it. Down in the ground, there was a clear set of large tracks, so big and so wide. We all were in disbelief and shock. I think we accepted that what we were looking at were Bigfoot tracks. The impression in the wet mud was at least 3 inches deep, which means whatever it was had to have been very, very heavy. Impossible for a human to weigh that much and put that much impression in the ground. Plus, the prints were easily 16 inches in length. I was able to measure, and about 8 to 9 in width. I've come to terms with it after a while, and I've experienced so much of it now that I get mildly upset when people tend to make fun of something that they do not understand. People need to stop being so ignorant. As time passes more and more, people will hopefully come out more with their stories, and press can start to pay more attention. It's going to be years before the world will believe us. A majority of us believe that it's too good to be open about your stories in the beginning, but as time passes, it's good to be more careful about what you say. There are people out there who will make fun of you and ridicule you, try to discredit you in any way. But I'm willing to weed through all the noise. I'm willing to talk to anybody who wants to. My father was a ranger in the Smoky Mountains for 30 years. He told me about 2 sightings of Bigfoot that he had during his years as a ranger. The first sighting being in the Luray Caverns. He said that this being followed him down the mountain after he saw it. He told me that it looked just like the Sasquatch on the Roger Patterson film. This park is also widely known for its encounters of Bigfoot and other strange UFO sightings, which I find very interesting, and the correlation is uncanny. We had also discussed a Bigfoot sighting that he had in the Great Smoky Mountains Park. He said that when he was on a spot ranger in Deep Creek, he had a sighting that is a few miles from where just another sighting had been reported. My father, although now retired, said that he covered many national parks and has had multiple sightings. He's planning to write out a book of all of his sightings, stories, and experiences. While the Sasquatch sightings are only a fraction of his wild herring stories, I can't wait to send you more. I would try and get him to write some down, because there's some crazy stuff, and not all of them are about ghosts, goblins, and werewolves. He's experienced some strange search and rescue missions and time anomalies, as he calls them. I myself work as a police officer, so I feel like I'm at a predisposition to follow in his footsteps of serving in some way. Even though it's not a park ranger, I'm still putting my dutiful service to use. And, as a cop, when I hear him tell me these stories, I watch him, watch his body language, and think very critically. I know he's not lying. I believe him. He tells me the same story every time, and not a detail, not even an ounce of it, changes. He said that he was most scared when that thing followed him down the creek that night. It was coming after him, he believes. Thanks again for listening. I've read several books by Linda Godfrey, and today even listened to a podcast with several other people who have had encounters with a similar creature. My encounter takes place at Fort Knox, Kentucky. I am a former ranger who had an incident at Fort Knox. I was working the interior police patrol at Fort Knox for the Army AC and was walking the old prisoner of war camp. As I walked to the end of the trail, I heard a rustling in the woods. I shined my light in the direction of the noise and observed a human-like figure. I stopped and the subject seemed to stop their movement as well. I sat down on a log, observed and waited quietly for probably about 15 minutes. The noise finally began going up again and moving in my direction. I stood up, shining the light all around, and I observed the subject at hand. I got a good look at what I thought was a meth head until closer I could see that it was actually in a fur coat, and I could make out that it ran down the trail to the other side of the fence. I yelled to it to stop, don't come any closer. I could see more of its facial features now, and was able to observe its flat face and eyes that reflected back my light, its pale skin, but yet it was wearing clothes, or they were wearing clothes. I heard a voice in my head and my entire body just scream at me that this was wrong, that whatever I was looking at was not human. Everything felt off, it felt wrong. Also, right after that sighting on the same night, I observed what I swore were two strange lights in the sky. I got a headache from looking at them. They were two different colors and swirled around, and they moved back and forth, almost the same way it would look like if you took somebody and gave them sparklers and they lit them, and they danced around with them. That's kind of what it looked like, although they weren't sparklers and nobody was holding them, but just two glowing orbs moving back and forth in the sky. It was very strange. I actually ended up telling my superiors about the incident, even though I was nervous to tell them while on my shift. I was told that it was a deer, for as far as the creature of what I saw, and what I saw in the sky was just planes. As I said initially, I'm a huge fan of Linda Godfrey's books, and it's really opened my eyes to all the possibilities of creatures out there.